Before we look into square and cube roots, let's review some exponents. So we've got our base number, and then our exponent is a smaller number raised above it. And when we square a number, we raise it to the power of 2. So 5 squared, which means 5 times 5, which is 25. And when we cube a number, we raise it to the power of 3, which is read as 5 cubed, which means 5 times 5 times 5, which is 125. So the square root is the opposite of squaring a number, and the symbol used to show a square root is called the radical sign. So for example, the square root of 36, ask yourself, what number times itself equals 36, which is 6? So the square root of 36 equals 6. Perfect square root means that the answer is a whole number, which means no decimals or fractions. Here's a list of the first 12 perfect squares. To find a square root on the calculator, you first hit the second button, followed by the x squared, because you'll notice the radical sign above it, and then type in the number you want to calculate the square root of, followed by the equal sign. For negative square roots, it's okay to have the negative sign outside of the radical sign, but it is not okay for it to be inside of the radical sign, because you cannot multiply a negative number by itself and get a negative solution. So if the negative is inside the radical, it's going to be not a real number. For cube roots, a cube root is the opposite of cubing a number. For example, the cube root of 27, you're going to ask yourself, what number times itself 3 times equals 27? And the answer is 3. So the cube root of 27 equals 3. A perfect cube root, just like a perfect square root, means that the answer is a whole number, meaning no decimals or fractions. Here is a list of your first 12 perfect cubes. And to calculate a cube root on a calculator, you start by entering in the 3 first, since it's a cube root, followed by the second button. And this time you're going to hit the button above the square root, because you'll notice this radical sign has a little x with it. So that's telling your calculator that you want it to be the cube root. And then type in the number you want to calculate the cube root of, followed by the equal sign. To find the square or cube root of a fraction, we're going to first find the square root of the numerator, find the square root of the denominator, and then now you have your answer. And you follow the same process for finding cube roots of a fraction. To undo a square or cube root, first, so if we had x squared equals 36, if you undo that, you're going to take the square root of your answer, 36, which is 6. However, remember that also negative 6 times negative 6 also equals a positive 6, or 36. So in this case, x could be positive 6, or it could be negative 6. If we know x to the third equals 64, to undo this, we're going to take the cube root of our answer, 64, which is 4. However, this time, a negative times a negative times a negative equals a negative. So in this case, our answer is only going to be positive 4, since 3 negatives equal a negative. When solving for a square or cube root, if we know the square root of some number equals 25, well, since this is square root, I'm going to take my answer and square it, which 25 squared equals 625. So that means x equals 625, because the square root of 625 equals 25. Now keep in mind the square root cannot equal a negative number. So if that was your question, your answer would be no solution. And lastly, the cube root of some number equals 12. So I'm going to take my answer of 12 and I'm going to cube it, or to the power of 3, which is 1,728. Therefore, my answer x is 1,728 because that number cubed equals 12. Now in this case, it can equal a negative number. So if that were the case, then your cube root underneath would be negative.